Hey, how's it going everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Wrestless Radio. This is an episodic podcast diving headfirst into the wacky and wonderful world of professional wrestling. I'm your host and longtime wrestling fan, Julian, back in control of this podcast, Concilio. And joining me on this log flume adventure ride and as the overall clueless perspective in this equation, he is the smoking hot smoker himself, Scott Nananovich. Scott, how is it going?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I mean, it feels pretty bad having Scott demoted, but, you know.
I had to take back control after the debacle of last week's intro that you just couldn't get through.
Well, I mean, I tried, man.
Not everyone can do it. It's okay. Leave it to the professionals.
Oh, yeah.
Are you ready for this one?
Oh, ready as ever, mate.
A famous man once said, controversy creates cash, and good lord was there cash to be made after this one. It's one of the most infamous backstage and on-screen controversies in wrestling history. It unintentionally changed the direction wrestling was headed in, it permanently affected the lives of everyone involved, and it ushered in the most financially successful period for the WWF to date. Yes, we are talking about the time one guy didn't want to lose a fake belt to another guy because he didn't like the other guy and everyone took themselves a bit too seriously. It's the Montreal Screwjob.
By the time Bret Hart stepped center stage for his matchup with Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series, he had apparently already closed the door on his WWF career.
I've given my 30-day notice with WWF, and right now I'm under contractual review with both the WCW and the WWF. I'm leaning strongly towards going one way.
In the end, his actions spoke volumes. Let's cut right to the chase. 7 days ago at the Survivor Series, did you or did you not screw Bret Hart?
Some would say I screwed Bret Hart. Bret Hart would definitely tell you I screwed him. I look at it from a different standpoint. I look at it from the standpoint of the referee did not screw Bret Hart. Shawn Michaels certainly did not screw Bret Hart. Nor did Vince McMahon screw Bret Hart. I truly believe that Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart. And he can look in the mirror and know that.
I'm sure in some parts of the country right now there's a collective groan that you're not accepting responsibility, that you orchestrated the situation, and the fact that people are not going to understand what you mean by Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I will certainly take responsibility for any decision I've ever made. I've never had a problem doing that. Not that all of my decisions are accurate. They're not. But when I make a bad decision, I'm not above saying I'm sorry and trying to do the best about it that I can. Hopefully the batting average is pretty good. I make more good decisions than I do bad decisions. And as far as screwing Bret Hart is concerned, there's a time-honored tradition in the wrestling business that when someone is leaving, that they show the right amount of respect to the WWF superstars in this case, who helped make you that superstar. That you show the proper respect to the organization that helped you become who you are today. It's a time-honored tradition, and Bret Hart didn't want to honor that tradition. And that's something I would have never ever expected from Bret, because he is known somewhat as a traditionalist in this business. It would have never crossed my mind that Bret would not have wanted to show the right amount of respect to the superstars who helped make him and the organization who helped make him what he is today. Nonetheless, that was Bret's decision. Bret screwed Bret.
So last episode we reviewed The Wrestler, and that film pretty much peeled back a lot of layers of the wrestling business and the industry itself. I want to ask you, have you heard of the term kayfabe before?
Never.
Never. Well, kayfabe, I believe it is used in other mediums other than wrestling. I think it can be used in film. But in terms of wrestling, kayfabe is basically the fictional universe in which wrestling operates under.
Okay, yep.
So it's maintaining the portrayal that everything is staged and that everything that is staged is real.
Okay.
If you get that If you get my drift there.
Yeah. So things have to fit into the WWE universe.
Yeah, so things that probably wouldn't make sense in real life would probably make sense in kayfabe.
Yeah.
And so when people use that term kayfabe, that's what they're referring to. This universe that wrestling has created within itself.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like a story for a TV show. Same sort of thing.
Yep.
Now on the other side of the coin, do you know what a shoot is?
A shoot?
A shoot.
Well, that's what happens when a photographer presses the button on his camera and there's something in the way.
Or when he pulls his gun out and then shoots someone because he got in the way of his shoot.
Yeah.
No, shoot actually means real in wrestling.
Oh, okay.
Shoot means real. In order to differentiate the story from reality, the unscripted, unplanned, and most of the time unpredictable, there are certain moments where a shoot can occur. So, say a wrestler gets injured in a match, gets really injured in a match, you'd call that a shoot injury.
Okay,
Just,
yeah.
you know, in order for fans to understand and in order for people to, like, kind of differentiate story, reality, that term is often used.
Okay.
And sometimes the lines between what is real and what is story can be blurred in wrestling. This is where it's difficult to tell as a fan watching if something is a work, so something that is within kayfabe, or is an actual shoot.
Okay.
So to start off, we are going to watch the infamous match that everybody has been talking about since the end of time. And then I'll explain what happened and why it happened. We are watching Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart for the WWF Championship at Survivor Series 1997, taking place in Bret's home country of Canada.
You know I'm sexy.
You know I'm sexy. You don't do that to a flag.
Is that his flag?
That's the Canadian flag. Oh, fucking hell. Oh my god. You don't do that to a fucking flag.
HBK equals fag. Wow.
Oh, god. Oh my god, he put in another one!
There's so many.
Oh my.
Wow.
So you can get a gist of Michael's fucking character already.
Wow.
Like, what a fucking piece of shit. This is Bret.
Is Bret Canadian?
Bret's Canadian. This is his home country.
Yeah, okay.
So he's the champion coming in, defending the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Very few wrestlers wear pink and can pull it off.
Yeah, he does actually look pretty badass in his pink.
It's referee Earl Hebner. He will be important later on.
Choking him with the
Die! I'll kill you with liberty!
I feel like the referees aren't actually doing anything.
Well, the match hasn't started yet. They're just brawling. Just kicked him in the nuts.
Fucking hell.
You hear the thud.
Yeah.
Oh.
That would Kane.
That's great.
Wow. It's like they don't even care about the match. They just want to destroy each other.
That's how much the feud has built up until that point.
Yeah.
What flags in this match? I was not expecting this. I think he just spat at the fans. He's fucking challenging him.
Wow, the audience hates him.
Yeah, I know. Massive amount of heat.
Yeah.
The sharpshooter is Bret's finisher. It's a submission move.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be coming to play in a sec.
Oh. Yeah, fuck. That would Kane.
Yeah. No! What a bump, Earl. Okay, here we go.
you're kidding me.
This is it.
Are you taking Bret Hart with a sharpshooter? Yes, he is. Are you kidding me?
What?
Brett didn't tap. But they rang the bell.
Oh.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. A lot to digest here. We've just eaten a big bowl of controversies. And now we are here to unravel them all. I don't think I could take another bite of any more controversy, can you?
Not for a while, at least.
Yes, first question, Scott. What are your immediate thoughts right now?
This is like a really shitty ending to the match.
Yeah?
Like, you know...
Remember, this is the end of a pay-per-view, so people have paid money for this.
Oh, yeah.
You know, 50, 60 bucks for a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And that's the finish.
And then it just finishes with Sean doing his move on him.
Yeah.
The match ends suddenly. And then, you know, Sean just essentially walks out of the ring straight away.
Yeah.
Like he's being ushered out really quickly.
Yeah. So you
Like,
already...
that's totally not what a wrestler would do.
Already you can tell something's not right. And I'm sure all the fans in the arena were like, what the fuck? So let me give you some background on the two superstars that are involved in this.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got Shawn Michaels and you've got Bret Hart.
Yeah.
Both of them started in the WWF around the same time, in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. Both guys started in tag teams, winning tag titles, and then worked their way into singles careers.
Mm-hmm.
They won Intercontinental Championships. They won WWF Championships as well. So they've both been world champion before.
Yeah.
Both amazing wrestlers as well. Like, Shawn had like a high-flying wrestling style.
Mm-hmm.
Bret was more of a technical wrestler and be a lot more ground-based offense.
Yeah.
These two guys were basically holding up this company for majority of the mid-90s.
Yeah, okay.
And this was during a period in time where the WWF was getting their ass kicked by their rival company, WCW.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting their ass handed to them.
Getting their ass handed to them. So the mid-90s for wrestling was kind of a down period.
Okay.
This was coming off the late 80s when you had Hulk Hogan leading the charge and Hulkamania and the rock and wrestling era and all of that kind of stuff. All of that had kind of faded away once the 90s came along. And mid-90s was a very prominent down period for the WWF.
Okay.
But their rival competitor, WCW, which was owned by media conglomerate Time Warner. Have you heard of Time Warner before?
No, never.
So they're an American company. I think they're kind of a media telecommunications company as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're big $1 billion. Like, I think they're rival to like Comcast and
Yeah, okay.
yeah. Have you heard of Comcast?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think same sort of company as them. It was headed by Ted Turner at the time. Now Ted Turner was a massive fan of wrestling, so he wanted WCW, World Championship Wrestling, to be the premier show for wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And so he created WCW Nitro to rival Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
So he positioned Nitro on the same time slot as Monday Night Raw to compete head-to-head directly to them.
Wow.
Yes, and at this point, WCW had a blank checkbook, which meant they had poached all of the WWF's top stars from the late 80s and early 90s, paying them massive amounts of money to jump ship, like millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, okay.
So Vince, at this point, had very little star power, so he was relying heavily on Bret and Shawn to draw money. Really relying heavily on them.
Okay.
Unfortunately, though, these two guys did not get along. Shawn was a notorious prima donna backstage. He would often be disrespectful, bully people, refuse to work with certain guys, which meant their careers couldn't go above a certain level because he was holding them down.
Yes.
So you can see kind of the selfish side and the ego seeping in.
Mm.
There are endless accounts of people that have said he's been difficult to work with and get along with.
Yeah.
just a massive ego that no one could control, not even Vince. So a very, very confronting individual to, work with backstage. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have Bret, who, coming from the Hart family, which is a very well-respected wrestling family, Bret was seen as a constant professional, very safe worker, respectable to people backstage.
Yeah.
But maybe to his detriment, he kind of took himself a little bit too seriously in terms of treating himself as a real competitor and as a wrestler. Like, Bret would always be portrayed as a role model for younger kids, which is a great thing. Don't get me wrong. But you would never see him in any comedic segments or joke around or really smile at all.
Yeah.
Very, very serious person. And I think that can kind of rub people the wrong way when you're not willing to kind of put yourself in a different position.
Yeah, well, I mean, someone who can joke and laugh and stuff is more human and more relatable.
Yeah, and I think that kind of maybe caused why these two weren't drawing the money that they could have. Bret, obviously more role model for kids, and around that mid-90s they were very much targeting a younger generation. So, and I think a lot of the young adults, I should say, were more interested in WCW, where they were providing more edgier content. It seemed like their product was a little bit more catered towards them. And at the time, that was the majority for the audience. So we have these two individuals that are not getting along, and the poor guy stuck in the middle is Vince. What does Vince do?
Yeah.
After WrestleMania 12, so in 1996, Bret took a leave of absence and began negotiating with WCW. He was offered a contract from them. He was offered a 3-year deal for $8.4 million.
Wow.
So that is $2.8 million a year.
Yeah.
To wrestle for the opposite company. So that's an extremely generous contract. And that's kind of the type of money that they were throwing around.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't blame people who are jumping ship to this rival company when they're giving out the fucking money.
Well, that'd be a lot of money at the time as well. That was 20 years ago, too.
Yeah, think of it now.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. But yeah, that's a ton of money to be throwing around, and people got to feed their families. You think of it that way, it's like, oh yeah.
Well, you can't really say no.
How can you turn that money down? Unless you're extremely loyal to the company you work for, which some guys were, and that's why they stuck around. So the offer was put to Bret, but Bret did not take that offer. He decided to show his loyalty to Vince and the WWF. So Vince offered him a 20-year contract, which meant he would be able to retire there and actually get some sort of management role backstage. So he'd actually have a career beyond his wrestling career.
Yeah, okay.
So, thinking long term. So Bret signs that WWF contract and everything seems fine. But by mid-1997, WWF was in financial strain. WCW had surpassed them as the #1 wrestling promotion in the world. And Vince had some plans to make the WWF a publicly traded company. And I think we've spoken about this, how in 1999 they became that publicly traded company. But Vince was already thinking about it in 97.
Yeah.
And because he wanted that to happen, any long-term commitments that he had made could not be fulfilled. So there goes that brand spanking new 20-year contract that he was offering Bret.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't afford it. He couldn't pay him for that.
Some folks along the internet know that in 1996, Bret signed a 20-year contract with the WWF. Then I'm sure there are some at home now. Some folks are saying, well, how could Bret Hart be, he's got 18 years left on the contract. How can he leave? Did Bret Hart ask you to leave the WWF, or did you ask him to leave the WWF?
This was a joint decision, and it vacillated somewhat as well when we were making the decision. It was a joint decision from both Bret and me. And ultimately what happened was that the two of us got together and orchestrated the opportunity for Ted Turner's wrestling organization to, quote, steal Bret. I felt that for business reasons, if Bret Hart and the salary we were paying him was not justified. And Bret felt that for creative reasons, and in fact that he had become sort of second banana in his own mind to Shawn Michaels, who had, quote, stolen his spot. So for financial reasons on my part and creative reasons on Bret Hart's part, the two of us got together and decided, okay, let's do the very best we can for you, Bret. So the two of us orchestrated Bret Hart receiving a 3-year deal in which he is paid $3 million a year, which I believe is the richest deal in all of professional wrestling. And that's working 125 days a year. So I felt from a personal standpoint that if Bret wasn't a great investment any longer for the WWF, although I really didn't want him to go, but nonetheless, that the least I could do for Bret is to help him help himself. And I told Bret, if in fact you do get this deal from Turner, I'm going to be the very first person personally to congratulate you. And I was. From a business standpoint, I didn't really want to lose Bret. He wasn't paying off from a financial standpoint, but nonetheless, I really didn't want to lose Bret.
He also had plans for other wrestlers to lead the company in the future. Vince wanted to rebrand the WWF in a completely different light.
Mm-hmm.
And we will be getting into that very, very soon.
Yeah.
The time period known as the Attitude Era
Oh, yeah.
is what it's been branded as and marketed as. That was the era where you had guys like Steve Austin and The Undertaker and Triple H and all these new up-and-coming stars, or existing stars, but had the characters to suit that era. You didn't have a place for Bret. Bret didn't factor into Vince's plans for this new product that he wanted to develop.
Because all those guys have so much character.
Yeah,
Whereas
their
Bret-
characters suited that era. Whereas Bret, I don't think his character could have adapted to that.
It's like serious, Mr. Serious.
Yeah,
sport
well,
guy.
he was a role model for kids. That's also the other thing.
Mm.
That's also the issue. And Bret was kind of unhappy with the direction the company was going in because they had already started kind of transitioning into this period, into that era. It started becoming a bit more edgy and started targeting more that young adult demographic.
Mm-hmm.
So with the sex appeal, the violence, the cursing, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, well, I guess, you know, even at the start of this match, you see Shawn Michaels walking in with his, like, big cross thing with all the glitz and glam over, and it's like, just a sexy boy.
It's such a mid-90s, and you look at that, and it's like, that doesn't suit the late 90s.
Mm.
Like, even Shawn Michaels, like, I don't think there was a plan to have him stick around, like, in 99, like, and be that same character, because I don't think it would have worked.
Mm.
It would have stuck out like a sore thumb. Bret also felt like his character was kind of stuck in limbo at this point, because he was this anti-American character that I was telling you about.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was cheered in his home country of Canada, but booed all over the United States. Because he was denouncing the US as this horrible place and, like, foul, and he just hated it, and that was his character.
Yeah.
But the WWF tours all around the US. So how is he going to revert back to a babyface character if he's going to be booed all over? He's already got that, like, because the heat that he was getting for that character was so strong.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I don't know if there's a way for him to turn back babyface so he can, you know, kind of reset his character.
Well, yeah, Americans are so patriotic.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be a hard thing to reverse.
Yeah, it was just like a real heat magnet, and it was just too strong. I think for him to just flip the switch and it'll be okay. I don't know if fans would have bought into it enough. So he felt like his character was just in limbo. It's like he couldn't be a face or a heel. His differences with Shawn also got more heated when Shawn started alleging that Bret was having an affair with a female talent. And he actually made a remark on television about it.
Oh, yeah?
This is how reckless Shawn Michaels was and how uncontrollable he was. Because he would just say whatever the fuck he wanted.
Yeah.
Because he was top of the company. What are you going to do? You know? Who's going to reprimand him for that? So Brett signs with WCW in November, and with Survivor Series looming, McMahon was worried that Brett would take the WWF Championship with him to WCW, which would have been a massive embarrassment if he did.
Yeah, okay.
So that was the worry McMahon had because he knew Brett was unhappy. And he thought Brett would take it out on Vince and the company by embarrassing them. So you can kind of start to see the logic of what we just watched.
Yeah.
And why that took place.
But if he took it to the other company,
Yeah.
would, what happens?
I mean, it's just... Because this feud between the two companies, it spilled onto screen. WCW at that time was throwing so many jabs at the WWF. The commentators would just crack jokes randomly throughout the broadcast about, our competition's doing real shit. And they'd even spoil the shows. Because Nitro was a live broadcast and Raw was taped.
Yeah.
The commentators used to spoil matches and finishes on the broadcast of their TV show.
Wow.
How scumbag is that?
Yeah.
Really, really, underhanded tactics. They used to do a lot of things where they'd throw jabs at them, and it was, really, really unprofessional. And so you can imagine if they had hold of the WWF Championship, the symbol of your company, and your rival company has that.
Are they still around, this company?
No.
They're totally...
Dead.
Well, fucking serves them right.
Completely dead.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it now because I think it's something really, really interesting to get into.
Yeah, okay. I'll stop interrupting you.
That's all right. So Brett and Vince agreed on the finish of the match to end in a disqualification. So I showed you some audio from the documentary, and you kind of heard the conversation between Brett and Vince.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about it's just going to end in a schmoz. A schmoz basically means a bunch of people run out. It's just a big clusterfuck. The match gets thrown out. And then the title was just going to get vacated. So that means no champion. So Brett's not the champion. Shawn isn't the champion. It's just the title is vacated.
Oh, okay.
Brett did not want to put Shawn over. He did not want to lose to Shawn clean.
Yeah.
And same thing with Shawn. Shawn did not want to lose clean to Brett.
Yeah.
And you can a lot of people kind of say Brett should have just done the job to Shawn and be professional about it. There's a little tidbit though that I've read up on, which I thought was really interesting. And if you put yourself in Brett's shoes, you kind of understand why he outright refused to give Shawn anything. And so one day Brett spoke to Shawn and said he'd be happy to lose if Vince wanted it, and he'd be professional about the whole thing and working safe.
Mm-hmm.
Shawn replied, that's good, because I would never lose to you.
Yeah.
Brett was pissed off by that, because it's I'm showing you the respect, and you won't give that in return.
Yeah, okay.
So, imagine that. In any everyday scenario. If you've had a disagreement with somebody. And it's look, let's be professional, let's just get along or whatever. And the opposite person has just said, I think you're a piece of shit and I don't respect you.
Yeah.
How defiant would you be to, screw that person over and not give them anything? So you put yourself in Brett's shoes and it's yeah, I don't blame him for refusing to give him the championship. So Vince wanted that belt off Brett, and the night before the pay-per-view, Vince, referee Earl Hebner, and Shawn, and some other management was also there, had a meeting to get the belt off Brett. The finish was to ring the bell once Shawn put Brett in the sharpshooter, which was Brett's submission finisher.
Yeah.
And as we saw in that footage, that's exactly what happened. Unbeknownst to Brett, who thought the finish was going to be a disqualification and everyone else was just going to run in and interfere and it was just going to end in a schmoz. That didn't end up happening. And so Brett was furious about this, obviously. He spat at Vince, as we saw.
Yeah.
Spat in his face. And there's like a close-up footage of another camera, not on the broadcast, but Vince just like wiping the spit off his face. And then they, like, Shawn, as soon as the match finished, Shawn hightails it out of there. He gets out of there straight away because he knows the fans are going to fucking riot at him.
Yeah.
Brett had an inkling that something was going to happen. Some sort of screw job was going to happen. Even other wrestlers were warning him that be aware that something could happen and they could try something on you. Because other wrestlers, I think it was Vader, who was another wrestler at the time, he was giving Brett advice that, like, don't, if Shawn goes for a pinfall, always kick out at 2. Do not give him an inch. Like, do not make it close to 3. Always just kick out at 2. Because you know how wrestlers, they'll do the count and they'll go all the way to 3, and then they'll just kick out right before it.
Yeah.
Vader was like, kick out at 2. Don't take the risk. Like, and Vader also said, don't let Shawn put you in a submission hold. Yeah. That was the other warning he gave. And yeah, Shawn put the submission on him and they rang the bell. So the aftermath, Vince goes backstage.
Yeah.
We watched footage from the documentary Bret Hart Wrestling with Shadows. So this was a documentary actually happening at the time that were documenting Bret's kind of, I don't know, I guess climax to his career, and they ended up stumbling upon this fucking massive controversy. So they basically struck gold, these documentary makers.
Yeah.
Of this fucking debacle. Bret and Shawn had a conversation. That was pretty interesting. Shawn denying any involvement in what happened.
I swear to God, on my life.
Vince was pretty adamant that you should not show anything to Bret or to anyone when he was speaking to Shawn in the meeting, to hide any involvement whatsoever. Prior to the match, referee Earl Hebner spoke to Bret. Bret asked him, are they going to screw me? Earl said, I swear to God, I am not involved in anything. I swear on my children's life.
Duh.
Earl Hebner said that.
Wow.
Earl Hebner rang the bell. Yeah, so Earl was also in that meeting.
Wow.
Yeah. So yes, Bret and Vince have their meeting in the locker room. A couple other officials in there. Vince's son is in there as well. Shane.
Oh yeah, Shane.
A young Shane McMahon is in there.
Yeah.
We saw the footage of the documentary where Vince walks out of the room, punch drunk, kind of stumbling a little bit. Bret pretty much just socked him in the face.
Yeah.
Don't blame him. I don't blame him that much.
I
mean, I know you're a pacifist and like you don't think violence is the answer. But if you give your word that you're not going to screw somebody, and then they screw you.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a stab, you know, but I don't think the solution to that is
Always violence.
is punching your boss in the face.
They are wrestlers, so they are physical people.
Are you saying that that's how they express their emotion? Makes it okay?
Understand that they are... No, I'm just saying, put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
And what kind of people they are. You know, they beat each other up for a living. I'm pretty sure they could handle themselves in a fight. And, you know, kind of... I know there's the cliche of, you know, be a man, you know, and challenge somebody. But I think with Bret kind of being justified in punching Vince in the face, I mean, yeah, he lied to his face. It's hard to really blame him for, you know, lashing out at him.
Well, I mean, the fact that Vince went into the locker room, that was a pretty stupid thing to do at the same time.
He had to do it. They said that he was hiding in his office. He had locked himself in his office.
Yeah.
And what happened was The Undertaker, who you've seen a little bit of, he was a locker room leader at that time. He was, a veteran over there. He actually went to Vince and said, "You need to go apologize to Bret right now." And so he got Vince out of his office to go into that locker room and confront Bret. And yeah, I think they had a little discussion, and then obviously Bret was fucking pissed and just punched him in the face, and then Vince walked out.
Certainly the bitterness of the loss at the Survivor Series could never be more prevalent. He stands in the ring and he spits in your face. Shortly thereafter, he is destroying WWF television equipment. Were you prepared for what happened after the match?
I was disappointed in Bret when he hit me. Very disappointed. I sustained a concussion as a result of it, with vision problems to this day. I'll get over it. And I didn't think it was the right thing to do. Bret seems to be crowing about that I've read, where he feels proud of striking me. And it wasn't a question of a confrontation, because even at 52 years old, I dare say that perhaps things would have been a little different if there were a confrontation. I allowed Bret to strike me. I had hoped that he wouldn't. I'd hoped that we could sit down and try and work things out as gentlemen. That's what I'd really hoped for, but that's not what happened.
Have you considered pressing charges or pursuing legal remedies for that situation in his locker room?
I have considered it. I think those options are still available. I'm not pursuing it at the moment. And I guess maybe it all depends on Bret as to whether or not I do.
And that was that. That ended their 14-year relationship. Bret had been working for that company.
Yeah.
Bret went on to WCW. Made millions.
Yep.
Retired in 2000 due to concussions. So he had a kind of an abrupt ending to his career. He could have gone longer. He could still go. It was just like an awful accident that happened. His WCW run was pretty mediocre, to say the least. They didn't handle him well, even though they had all the hype in the world. They had this big star who's defected from their rival competition.
Yes.
And they fumbled it. They completely fumbled it. But that's kind of the story of WCW, fumbling everything. And Vince went on to create the Attitude Era. The most financially successful period in all of wrestling.
So this is kind of like, the rebirth, you would say. Like the Montreal Screwjob started what, wrestling has become.
I wouldn't say it started. I'd say it was a good transition into what we will get into very soon, and that's the Vince McMahon character. Yeah. Mr. McMahon.
So before this, Vince McMahon was just the boss. He didn't have an integral role into wrestling.
The interesting with Vince, Vince was a commentator up until this point. He wasn't commentating on this show, but he was a regular commentator, play-by-play guy. And he wasn't really well known that he was like the boss of the company, because he wasn't character, he was just a commentator. I think that's what most people thought.
Okay.
There was like a kayfabe storyline, like president of the WWF, and his name was Jack Tunney, but he wasn't actually the boss. Vince was always the boss.
Okay.
He just kind of, used this as a storyline device. But yeah, Vince was always a commentator, and then it's interesting with this controversy, he was kind of ousted as the real sort of boss of the World Wrestling Federation. So Vince sat down with Jim Ross, a fellow commentator of his, and they talked about what happened the night before. And Vince uttered the famous line, "Bret screwed Bret." I guess his feelings at the time were like, he left me no choice, essentially. So a lot of people say Bret took himself too seriously and that he should have just laid down for Shawn and, done business right, but I don't blame him for, doing what he did and standing his ground or standing up for what he believed in. And Sean, what are your feelings on Sean? Kind of a dick.
He seemed like a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with his stage performance as well.
How so?
Well, the shit he was doing to the flag.
Oh, during the match.
That
was fucking awful.
I mean, he's playing his character, but still, picking your nose with a flag, rubbing it.
You rubbed it on his crotch. He started dry humping the flag.
Yeah,
like fucking hell.
Yeah, there's character. I mean, throwing the flag on the ground would probably be, and stomping on it.
Yeah.
That's still pretty horrible.
It's just
just took it so far.
It's also the mentality. It's we can do it to the Canadian flag, but if anyone did it to the American flag, fucking hell, people would be there with pitchforks.
Yeah.
Jesus, you'd be crucified if you did any of that to the American flag. But it's the Canadian. Who cares, But the fans were livid. At one point during the match, Sean was goading these fans in the front row. Oh, and they were going to fucking jump that barricade if security wasn't there.
Oh, yeah.
They were I'm going to fucking fight him. The amount of heat that Sean had in that match. It was unbelievable. But you know what? For a controversy that left everyone in shambles and, everyone was heartbroken and angry and upset and all these horrible feelings... Everyone made fucking millions after it anyway.
Yeah.
It's hard to feel sorry for anyone.
Yeah.
They went on and made millions. Vince made fucking multi-millions. Brett made multi-millions. I don't know. It's hard to really kind of feel sorry for people. And
what about Sean? What happened to him?
Sean actually retired a few months after this. Yeah, he had a back injury that kept him out for 4 years.
Yep.
He returned in 2002 to... the WWE at the time, and he continued to wrestle until 2010.
Okay.
So when he came back in 2002, he was basically a born-again Christian in real life.
Yep.
So a lot of the people that he had wronged in that time period where he was a fucking cunt, basically, he kind of had to earn the trust back of people. And so he was this kind of born-again Christian. People don't really buy into it that much, that he's a changed man and that he's not that, young, obnoxious fuckwit anymore. But that's Sean's story. And Sean ended up, having a pretty successful career regardless of what happened, and made his millions as well. I'm sure he did as well. So, you know what? Everyone fucking went off and made a fortune.
That was just the shittest ending for the fans.
Oh yeah, the pay-per-view ending was just... it was abrupt, and it was also just confusing.
Yeah, or where it cut off. What we watched, the pay-per-view, is that what the people at home...
Yeah, they would have seen it cut to Sean leaving the arena, and the pay-per-view just went off air. Yeah. And so everyone would be like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
Imagine putting yourself in a fan in 1997 when you don't really have internet either. So you can't really search up on dirt sheets what's going on. So you have... You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, just cut abruptly.
You'd be furious.
Well, you kind of expect a spectacular ending to...
Exactly.
This kind of thing, or at least, commentators talking about it, when football ends, it's never just the end. They talk about it, the match for ages kind of thing. Or, spectacular show, but... Yeah, I don't know. Probably the fans were those most wrecked by this experience, I guess.
Yeah.
If you were only a story writer, and the Survivor Series was the final chapter in the life story of Bret Hart, the WWF years, how would you have preferred to write the final chapter?
As a storyteller, I would have hoped that Bret's story would be a dramatic one. I would hope that Bret's story would be one that would give him dignity, that would give him the poise to state that I was maybe the greatest WWF superstar ever in terms of his departure. And one way of being able to give back to the company, being able to give back to those individuals, those superstars who helped you achieve the level of success that you have. When you know that you're leaving in a time-honored tradition, might have been, for argument's sake, that after the most grueling match that Bret ever had in his life, that Bret was pinned. But in that small moment of defeat, Bret would have stood straight up and shown the whole world what a true champion, both as a human being and a wrestling persona, he really is. And if I had been Bret, if I were writing the story, I can see Bret, after a 1, 2, 3, simply saying, okay, to his opponent, you got the best of me. I want to congratulate you. I want to stick my hand out and congratulate you. And furthermore, I want everyone in the whole locker room to watch my match so that I can show, for those who follow in my footsteps, the way in a time-honored tradition this is to be done. To show every individual, every secretary, everyone in Titan Sports, the World Wrestling Federation, who counts on me to do the right thing, that I was there, that I was a superstar, maybe the greatest of ever, and I went out the way a true champion would go out.
Are you able to step back and objectively look at this thing and evaluate your friend, your perhaps former friend, Bret Hart, the human being, and have sympathy for this man?
Sympathy? I have no sympathy for Bret whatsoever. None. I have no sympathy for someone who was supposed to be a wrestling traditionalist, not doing the right thing for the business that made him, not doing the right thing for the fans and the performers and the organization who helped make him what he is today. Bret made a very, very selfish decision. Bret's going to have to live with that for the rest of his life. Bret screwed Bret. I have no sympathy whatsoever for Bret.
So that was the Montreal Screwjob. Scott, have you been screwed enough tonight?
Well, it is in the middle of the day.
Oh, yeah.
So the night time hasn't occurred yet. But I think this is probably enough screwing for now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Enough screwing around?
Yep.
So this will transition into our next series that we're going to be working on, which is Austin versus McMahon. We are detailing the feud between Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin throughout the late 90s into the 2000s. So we are looking at a timelined recount of the events that this rivalry took place in. We'll be looking at all the matches, the segments, and everything in between, because it's a fucking entertaining rivalry. And it's why a lot of people got into wrestling. So it's pretty important to show you, I think. But that's going to do it for Wrestless Radio Episode 5. Just to let you know, this audio podcast is available on multiple platforms, like on our YouTube channel. There will be a link in the description to that for you. Also on Facebook at facebook.com/restlessradio.
Very soon you'll be finding us on iTunes, and we also have a Twitter account at Wrestless Radio. So do considering following us.
I'll be staying active on there, so if you have any questions, suggestions, or anything for future episodes, please do hit us up. If you like this episode, please leave a rating, review, a like, or whatever your heart desires. It is all appreciated. Thank you once again for listening. I've been Julian.
And I'm Scott.
And we'll see you next time on Wrestless Radio.